Hello, everyone. It's time to eat, drink, and be merry with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy.
Hey everybody, it is Wine Time with Peggy. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Eat, Drink, Be Merry show, where every first Wednesday we get to chat with Peggy-Fiandaca. Her and her husband Kurt own LDV Winery out in Arizona. The winery, the vineyard, is actually in the Chiricahua foothills, so it's in South Arizona, kind of near southeast of Tucson. And their tasting room is in Scottsdale. So if you're going out to explore and look up art, well, you've got to have wine. And that's why she's on the first Wednesday, because every month should start with wine. So I encourage you to go to their website, LDV-Winery.com. You can also catch Peggy's past interviews with us on Blend Radio and TV.com. So how are you, Peggy?
I'm terrific. Summertime is here in Arizona already, but it's wonderful.
That means to me that we need to be out by the pool with some patio wine.
Absolutely. You need a pool pounder like I talked about last month.
Yes. Yes. Well, what about would a Grenache do good too? A nice kind of.
Absolutely. I like to put a little chill on a Grenache, so add some, put it in the refrigerator. It just, the wonderful fruit flavors of that Grenache will really sing, and perfect by the pool.
And even at the end of the day too, to go out. I mean, that's the beauty of Arizona evening times. It's like 9 o'clock and you forgot that you're supposed to go to bed and you're like, no, it's so nice out,
And the stars are incredible too.
Oh, so, yeah, especially now the vineyard. I know you have RV travelers through Harvest Host stay there on occasion, but they must love it out there.
Oh, they do. The sky is so big and filled with stars, and they get to be actually in the vineyard camping. Oh. So it's awesome.
I've heard from my friends in Tucson that monsoon season has hit, and especially south of Tucson, they've had some really good monsoon rain. How has that been for you guys out in the vineyard?
The monsoon has hit. It's the intense rains that we get, and it comes up from Mexico into southern Arizona and actually throughout Arizona. So this past week, it really kicked into high gear, and rain is always good. And in the vineyard, we like to get rain instead of always having to irrigate. And so far, so good.
Oh, good. So it doesn't hurt the grapes or anything like that at this point?
No, at all. Not at all. So we are, just to kind of give you an update as to where we are in the vineyard. We're about 2 months from beginning to harvest the white grapes, and maybe 3 months still out here in July for the red wine grapes. But right now, the real focus is on berry development. I brought a little illustration. It's not real.
No, because she's not going to pick any grapes unless they're going in the bottle.
No, exactly. So right now, we haven't gone through veraison yet, which is when the grapes turn purple. But right now, the grapes are actually all in this yellow, greenish kind of look. But what I wanted to illustrate, what we're trying to do at this point in the vineyard, is to allow all of the clusters, the berries, to start soaking up water and also the nutrients from the ground. So we're trying to make sure that the energy is going into these clusters. And the clusters are fuller, so there's more you can see in it. This is when the clusters start to really tighten up. And so at this time, we've also finished shoot thinning. So we go through the vineyard and take off any of the vegetation that is not what we need to grow these beautiful grapes. They're extras, so we cut them all off and drop those so that we can create ventilation in the vineyard and really focus the energy on the what's left on the vines, so that we're focusing in on the vegetation that we need. And that ventilation in the vineyard is so important. So as this cluster closes up, there's no moisture on the inside, because that can create mold or as that cluster closes up. So that ventilation and that airflow in the vines is so important at this time.
It doesn't also help with pests too, because I remember you know, with our gardens, like if you didn't have good ventilation, especially in summer, when it gets really moist in the air, especially monsoon season, we get aphids and things. And so, you know,
Right.
and it's okay. We let birds come in, but I know that you guys don't really want the birds in the vineyard so much.
Not so much. I mean, right now it's not a big deal because there's really no sugar development yet in the grape clusters.
Okay.
So the birds aren't that interested quite yet, but they will be soon. And we'll have to turn the bird guard on and try to scare them away. But right now, we have the best crop set ever at LDV Winery.
Really? This is like the big year.
This is the big year. We had a horrible year last year, so this is a big year. So keep your fingers crossed as we move through the growing season.
That must make you want to drink more wine. What, like, you know what I mean? Having that anticipation of what is Mother Nature going to do, what's going on in the environment. And I mean, I would sit there, I would drink more wine if I was a winemaker.
Well, it makes you very nervous because a lot can happen as you know, as we move through the next couple months, a lot can happen. But right now, the field looks beautiful, and all that we're trying to do is to take care of it so that it continues to be phenomenal.
So when you're growing at this point, right, you're saying they're not getting as sweet. So right now it's like the water and the nutrients, and then it's like the development of the fruit, and then it starts getting sweeter and sweeter as it ripens and ages. Correct. Do you get to a point of like maybe the fruit? I mean, does the fruit get to its optimum size, or while it's getting sugar, does it keep getting bigger?
Each varietal will get to its optimal size. You know, it varies from very small little clusters to bigger clusters. So each variety of grape has a different size that it gets to. However, depending on how healthy and how strong it is, how large the clusters will vary. You know, if it's really a great growing season and they're happy and they're getting all their nutrients and they're getting wonderful rain, they're going to get these. We've had clusters that have been huge, you know, so
you can make more wine then, right?
Yes, exactly. So
we like that.
Yeah. So it just all depends. You know, we monitor the soils and we do petiole samples where we test the nutrients in the vine. So we just really take care of them as they're really concentrating their energy on that grape development right now.
So, okay, so when you get these nice big crops, right, that you want, so you get to make more wine. And you, as far as I remember, and what I've seen on Facebook and our previous conversations about going through COVID and, you know, the supply chains and, you know, issues, it looks like from the one delivery I saw on Facebook that you had all these corks to keep going. In other words, you're invested in this now. You've got more corks than anybody thought of having. You guys are corked. So you need to make a lot of wine because you took all of the cork out of Australia. they can't even make their hats.
Yeah, we took advantage. Luckily we had some revenues that we had. We got the cork we needed. We got the bottles were the tricky part. We had a whole semi truck of bottles delivered.
Oh, well, then you need some croppage, man.
Yes.
We want crops. We'll be crossing fingers because that's exciting. And then, but okay, so once you harvest, then it gets into the winemaking. Then you're like, you have to wait for the wine to do its magic, right? You have to wait for it to happen. Don't you get a little anxious? Like, come on, get along with it.
You know, this vintage 2022, we won't bottle that for 3 years. So we won't, this crop that we're going to be harvesting this year, you won't begin to see it on the market for us until 2025, 2026. So the key for us is to make sure that it's getting its great start, it's wonderful fruit. Once it gets into the winery, we just want to enhance that, not really change that, just really enhance it. Put it in its barrels, put it in its stainless steel, and let it just do its magic over the wine aging process.
And you have patience, and I think that again, I'd have to have more wine.
We have plenty of wine.
I'd probably like be drinking way too much wine. You know, they always say if you own a bar, don't sit on the other side of the bar.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing. Well, I think I would have a problem owning a winery. You may find me having just way too much fun and not making any money.
Right, right.
But it's
Well,
an expensive hobby, you know, when you do that. But yeah, no, it is really impressive what you do and go through. And I think that's what's so exciting to me about these interviews with you and these conversations is for people to understand how much work, blood, sweat, and tears and finances go into making wine work and palatable and enjoyable and just that experience. So people understand the value of what is in that bottle is, you know, it's so important. We must have good wine in the world, and your wine is exceptional. And everyone should know it's mostly Rhone varieties that you're doing. One thing I love too is you started doing the term of the month, and actually other guests on different shows with us. Now we have our employment attorney did a thing on legalese because none of us know what the heck was going on in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trials. Like, is that for real? Can they do that? What do they mean? You know, things like that. So I think these terms are good. So what is the term for today?
The term for today, since we're going to be talking all about the aromas of wine and how to determine the nuances of the aroma, you also have to determine what's bad about wine. And so I wanted to introduce you to wine taint. So how do you determine if a wine is bad or not? You know, when the sommelier delivers your wine at your dinner and hands you the cork, what you're looking for is if that wine is bad or not, or you've heard the term corked. And so what you do is you look at that cork and see if there's any mold or anything, you know, look funny on that cork, but you also smell the cork. And if you smell things like a wet dog, now everyone has probably, if you've owned a dog or a cat.
We know about wet dogs.
You know, and as soon as I say wet dog, you remember that smell, right? Well, the wine is tainted. It's probably corked and it's probably not good. I would hand that cork back to the sommelier and say, why don't you smell that? I think there's something wrong. The other thing you might smell is a wet newspaper. So kind of remember
like
what that musty smell. Or if you go into maybe a winery and you smell something like nail polish remover, acetone kind of smell, that's not good. You don't want anything that smells like that because the wine is, well, there's some sanitary issues going on in their winery and the wine is probably tainted. So when you're in a restaurant and you're tasting wine and you're looking at the cork, you're not tasting it if you like it or not. Because if you don't like the wine, you just made a bad decision, right? You don't send the wine back because it's something you don't like. But you do send it back if it's bad, if it's a corked bottle or if there's something wrong about it. So wine taint is the term of the day.
Wow. So, you know, I've had wine that wasn't good thinking this doesn't, and even like you can, the color sometimes kind of gives it away. I think too, there's something that just cloudy, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I've had wine where I tasted it and you know, I didn't, you know, you need to say no.
Right.
This is because as soon as you start drinking it, like my chest did not like it. Let's just put it that way. My body went, this is not healthy. Like I almost started wheezing out of that. Wow. And I don't know what, I just remember that one and going, this tastes really, I mean, I've never had wine that tasted like that. And I didn't finish it because so I don't know what was going on, but it could be mold, you know, like you're saying.
It could be something going on in that bottle. And by all means, if you don't like it, don't drink it. Or if you're hesitant.
Yeah.
But you got to remember, an older wine will have some cloudiness to it.
Okay.
And an old wine, like, and I'm talking like if you had the opportunity to try a 30-year-old red wine or 40-year-old red wine, you will have some cloudiness in it. You will have probably sediment in it. You will have around, when you pour it in the glass and around the edges, might have a tawny coppery look to that red wine. That's common as a wine ages. But also in a wine like ours, because we don't fine or filter our wines, you will potentially have some, they're pretty clear. I don't think you'll have a lot of cloudiness, of course, in the wine, but you will find sediment, and you will, like our Grenache, I think I talked about last time, at our altitude at 5,000 foot elevation, thin-skinned grapes get sunburned from the intensity of the sun. And of course, the color of the wine comes from the grape skins. And so if they're sunburned, you might have a little bit of that tawniness to it.
Okay, so, and if you get sediment, you know, just pour the wine through a coffee filter.
Right. I mean, it is.
Seriously, you know, if it bugs you, to me, I'm just like, oh no, that's, you know, it's part of it to me. I don't want to get rid of it, you know,
right.
But people freak out a little bit and they think it's bad sometimes. Like, you know,
right.
it's not like bad milk, you know.
Yeah.
And it's weird. No, it's just part of it. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing's living in there. Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I always tell our customers, it's because we love you. We don't put any additives to clarify that wine. So we just love you.
And you're vegan. I want to always say that too, because that's also interesting. People don't realize it. The first thing you think is all wine is vegan, right? Because there's no meat in it, but that's not true.
Yeah. So, you know, that wine taint is something you don't want. And if you don't like the wine, don't drink the wine. But hopefully you don't come across it. I mean, I've been drinking wine since probably before I was legally able to drink wine. But, and I can only call on a handful, you know, at a restaurant where I found a bottle of wine that was actually tainted.
Yeah. I think it's only been once for me, you know, it's just a one-time deal. And you know, can wine go bad if it isn't stored at the right temperature?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a living thing in that bottle.
Yeah.
So just because I put it in the bottle and I send it off to the marketplace doesn't mean it's not going to continue to evolve. So like, for example, if someone returned a bottle of wine to us, we just throw it away because I can't resell that wine because I don't know how they took care of it, or if it sat in the car, or they, you know, where, I don't know. So I have to basically toss that. But when a wine leaves our place, you can guarantee that we took care of that wine every step of the process.
And don't you only ship during the right seasons?
Correct.
Like when it's not too hot.
Correct. So all those things come into play to make sure that the wine is as stable and enjoyable when you pop that cork.
Cool. And you mentioned Grenache, and I brought that up too, because I know your recipe this month is wine poached chicken. So basically it's tipsy chicken.
Tipsy chicken. There you go. I should call it tipsy chicken. Absolutely.
Tipsy chicken. It's soaked in Grenache. It's happy.
Yes.
It's giggling when it comes out of the oven.
Exactly. It's a happy recipe, happy chicken breast. But I chose this one because we're going to talk about aromas.
Yeah.
And this is so aromatic because you do a bouquet garni, which is really pulling together some wonderful herbs like bay leaves and whatever fresh herbs that you might have that you would want to use, peppercorns and garlic, and you tie them up. And that actually is going to go in with the wine, and the chicken will soak up all of those flavors. And so while it's cooking, oh my goodness, it's so aromatic.
So you might as well have wine while it's cooking, right?
Oh, of course. And you should
There's no cooking without wine.
Exactly.
It's all part of it.
Exactly. Drink your white wine while you're cooking, and then the Grenache that you cooked with that chicken, have another bottle of that while you're enjoying the
that's
dish.
a good thing. And now, so when you see cooking with wine, like, do you want to use your good wine in cooking? That's a whole other deal.
Well, it is wonderful, and it really does make a difference when you cook with the wine you're going to be serving, or the wine that you made the dish out of. You want to be able to drink it because the pairing is so perfect. So, I mean, this doesn't take this takes about 2 cups of Grenache in it for
just act as though the chicken's coming to your house for the party.
Yeah.
And so you're giving some back.
Yeah. So it's for a pound of skinless, boneless chicken breast, you have 2 cups of wonderful wine. And you should always make sure that the wine you cook with is something you would also serve to your guests.
Okay.
So
because I didn't know if you were going to go run for the boxed wine. You know what I'm talking about for cooking. I know.
With. Well, this, you got to be careful of the sugar content of that wine or the salt content of that wine. So, if you're choosing a great Grenache like an LDV Grenache, which is still very reasonably priced, you want to cook with that wine also because it's 0 residual sugar and you know what you're getting. But in a boxed wine, probably the sugar content is a little bit higher, and that affects the recipe. So you would need to adjust for that wine that you're pouring. So this one calls for a medium to dry wine.
Okay. So your Grenache is perfect. Awesome. Yeah. I love this. You learn something all the time. Now, when then we're talking about the actual smelling of the wine, okay, the aromas and the scents that, what's that fancy term that you had written down that I looked, I said, look, Peggy's going to talk about that today. We're going to sniff wine.
We're going to sniff some wine and improve our sense of smell. Le-Nez-Du-Vin, so the nose of the wine, is basically what I like to call it. Or you can call it aroma wine therapy for winos if you want. But
we like that.
But believe it or not, as we get older, we lose our sense of smell. And I know. So you have to practice. Like everything else, we have to exercise our sense.
I didn't know that.
Of nose. And what's fun is especially if you're a beginner wine taster, if you begin to be able to smell and pick out the nuances of the wine, you'll be able to describe what you're tasting better, but you'll also begin to determine what you like or what you don't like about wine. And that'll help you choose the right wine to fit your palate. What's great about wine grapes is that when you ferment a wine grape, it tastes like everything but grapes, right? It tastes like strawberries or cherries or citrus.
Tobacco even.
Tobacco or wood or whatever it might be. But when you ferment pineapple, it tastes like pineapple. If you ferment any other fruit, it'll taste like that fruit. So the fun thing about wine grapes is it doesn't. It picks up all of these other aromas. And I don't know about you, but do you have a smell or an aroma that can transport you to another time or place if you smell something? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about like lilacs, I always think of Julian up in the mountains of San Diego, and everybody would always say they love the lilac season because it reminds them of their grandma or like this and that. And I'm just like, well, this is my new, scent that I love every time. It just takes me back to a beautiful spring day with the birds and, being outside drinking wine. Or like orange blossoms are amazing.
It's so powerful. I think the scent, when you have that scent memory, it brings you back. Like I'm Italian, of course, and my grandma cooking Italian bread on Sunday for Sunday supper and coming into the kitchen and smelling the yeast while she's making
love that.
it. Yeah, and then once it's in the oven, the smell of the aromas of that bread being baked is so powerful, and it just makes me happy. It brings back those happy memories. The same thing with wine. Those aromas when you smell a Pinot Noir from Mendocino, it's like walking through a strawberry patch, and you pick up that in that Pinot Noir, and it's absolutely wonderful. And if you smell those strawberries, you probably would lean to identify that as a Pinot Noir if you didn't know.
This is kind of like bird watching. It's not about seeing the birds. It's like you hear the bird to know what bird is there. Then you know where to look for the bird. Does that make sense? Because so I never looked at, to me, I always went, you go wine tasting and you go, what are the scents that you're bringing out? But I never thought of like a Pinot Noir always having that kind of, remember the movie Bottle Shocked?
Oh yeah, of course.
Remember
Yep.
when it was like the end, he had that big challenge of being able to taste the wine and knowing exactly what vintage and where and how. So I bet you the sense of smell was part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Because believe it or not, when you taste something, you only can taste four things, and everything else is aromas. So,
Oh,
do you
wow.
have any idea of what those four things are that
Well, I
you
was
can
going to think
taste?
sour, salt, sour, sugar. There's pungent. I always thought there were seven, but I
There's
did.
four
Yeah.
key ones. So, salt, I have a little bit of
Okay.
salt. Bitter. So,
Oh,
there's
that's, yeah, yeah.
bitter. So, you really get, I have like this dark chocolate has that bittery kind of
Oh,
taste.
I thought we were going to have Bloody Marys just now.
Yeah. And then sweet, my little
Oh,
red jelly beans are a good,
oh,
and
hand
they
those
hit,
over.
yeah, and then sour. Those are
Oh, see?
basically the four things that you can actually taste. All of the rest is aromas. And that's why
Wow.
being able to identify the nuances of aromas are so critical to wine tasting. And
You know, I think we're not satisfied when we eat if we don't have all four of those things,
right. I
and
mean,
then the smell gets you hungry too.
right, right. I mean, you were saying that you have a bit of a cold right now, but my husband had a cold for almost 6 weeks, and he couldn't taste anything, and
Oh, no.
because he had lost his sense of smell, he couldn't taste anything. So we couldn't bottle our wine because we didn't trust his ability to really determine if it was ready or not. So we had to
Wow,
wait.
that sucks.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's why I swear this whole thing with COVID, everyone's like, oh, you lose your sense of taste and smell. I'm like, dude, I do not want just because of that. I mean, what would I do at wine time? I wouldn't have wine. And then my
yeah,
body would go into talk about body shock. Like it would
yeah,
not know what to do. Like it wouldn't have its blood transfusion. But
yeah.
that's you need to have that. But that's really interesting. Like, so it's really that's where the craft part comes in. So you're
Correct.
developing your taste and smell to be able to craft
Correct.
this wine. It's not just by some little thermometer saying, okay, ding, it's ready.
Right, exactly. And the wonderful thing is that women, believe it or
Mhm.
not, have a better sense of smell than men,
Oh,
but men can practice, and just like everyone, you can practice and improve that sense of smell. You
mm.
know, so um, knowing the various components of what might be in wine. So, for example, um, there's some basic wine scents, like I have some cinnamon sticks.
Ooh.
And you can kind of remember what a cinnamon stick really smells like. It has that pungent smell of and a sweetness to it. Well, that's a very basic wine scent that you might pick up in a red wine, most likely. And then
Dark chocolate. Mm.
yeah, dark chocolate. Yeah. And I have some nutmeg here, So have you ever grated nutmeg into a dish, a spicy, maybe
Yeah, like rhubarb
rhubarb?
dishes.
Uh-huh. Or,
Drunken crumble. Sorry,
yeah.
there's a running theme going on with us here.
But nutmeg is another common basic characteristic of a wine scent. So is coffee or
Mm,
peppercorns you might pick up. So, uh,
licorice.
yep. So understanding those basics helps you, and then determining the intensity. So you might smell a little bit of coffee in it, and it might be a light uh, scent. So it might be a lighter, maybe red wine. And then you might pick up a really like robust coffee taste to it. So the intensity is even higher. So that might be a more robust wine that you're picking up. So
Mm.
not only determining what are those basic scents, but the intensity of those scents. Can you determine a light coffee nose versus a really bold espresso kind of coffee nose?
So it's like,
So
some of the white wines have like a crisp apple, sometimes there's grapefruit, those kind of
right.
lighter flavors, scents, I should say. But there's also like a mineral kind of thing going too. Like sometimes I smell soil
Yeah.
in
So
wines.
absolutely. So there's the fruit characteristics. So once you begin to determine the basics in the nose, then you might determine the fruit characteristics of the nose. So like red wine will primarily have red fruit like strawberries or cherries. And of course, they'll be at varied intensities, or black fruit like blueberries or plum are typical kinds of fruit characteristics that you might pick up in a red wine. And then a white wine, like you said, you might pick up those more exotic or subtle kind of characteristics in whites like citrus, maybe lemon or lime, or a stronger scent of orange or tangerine. Because, you know, if you had wine, red and wine in a black glass and you didn't know which was red and which was white, the only way to tell is by picking up those characteristics that you're smelling in those wines to determine if it's a red wine or a white wine.
I always thought, though, red wine was thicker for some reason.
Not always. No, no.
Oh, that's true. That's true, because there's those like a Pinot Noir isn't very,
correct.
You know, yeah.
So that viscosity doesn't necessarily, the viscosity of the wine or that intensity or the thickness, as you say, intensity of the wine.
See, this is why we need Peggy.
Yeah.
This is a thick wine.
Yeah. So if you had like red fruit, like strawberries or cherries, you might be drinking a Pinot Noir or a Grenache, or maybe even a Nebbiolo or a Sangiovese, or maybe a Zinfandel has that red kind of fruit aromas as well as taste. Or if you had black fruit, then you're probably, you know, the more blueberries or plums, you're probably in the Cabernet or Merlot or Syrah has those wonderful flavors of blackberry. And
you're making me thirsty and hungry. I feel like we need, but that's the other thing too. When you have the, you know, tastings, you can have like the different meats and cheeses and crackers, but it's kind of interesting to have wine with fruit as well. So it's kind of this, like, you know, you'll have grapes while you're drinking wine and, you know, apples or, you know, that kind of thing. It's kind of a refreshing way to cleanse your palate, but at the same time, do you want to pair the fruit with the wine? I know we talked about salads before, but do you want to, like, if you are drinking a big jammy red wine, do you want to have the blackberries and the plums to eat at the same time, or would you do something opposite?
I would do something similar because, again, like and like, because they complement each other. So, and it would help you really pick out the nuances of the wine. You don't want to put, for example, a citrus with a black fruit kind of wine.
No.
So orange slices with a Mourvedre or a Petit Syrah, they would clash. And they would, either one, the wine or the fruit will taste bad.
I just don't think oranges go. Like,
no. Yeah. I mean, if you had like a more subtle wine, like a Pinot Grigio or a Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, or classic Chardonnay, you might be able to go with more fruit that is tangerine or orange potentially. But if you wanted more exotic tropical fruits like pineapple or mango, you might want to choose a Viognier or a Marsanne or Roussanne or a Riesling to pair with that.
All right, now I'm hungry and thirsty even more because you mentioned mango, and then I'm thinking, ooh, nice light wine and little, here we go. This is a dangerous monthly thing, man.
I know it, exactly.
After this, I'm going to go raid the fridge.
Yeah. So, you know, when you smell that wine and you taste that wine, so we talked about the basics, we talked about determining the fruit characteristics, but also what can influence the aroma or the taste is what you store that wine in. Are we going to store it in a barrel, and then what kind of barrel do we want to store that? Because it's going to impart not only an aroma, but also flavor profile to that wine. Or am I going to put it in stainless steel or a neutral oak barrel because I just want the original fruit characteristics to really shine through?
Yeah, because some wineries, I know they do the whiskey barrels, like for red wine, and I know they do. There's just different distillers doing different things that way, which I find interesting.
So if you smelled your wine and you picked up maybe a vanilla smell, or a toast kind of smell, or coconut
Mm.
or dill, that actually might be coming from the barrel that wine was stored in. So you would be able, if you're improving your sense of smell, aromas, you would know what fruit it was. So it'll lead you to what kind of wine it is. And you would get a hint by smelling it of what kind of barrel or aging vessel that wine was stored in. Was it a barrel, or was it more minerally? Maybe it was in one of those cement eggs or in stainless steel.
Stainless steel, I always thought, were mostly like for crisper wines, kind of like a cleaner, like it's letting the wine do its thing instead of, you're not
Correct.
smelling stainless steel. You know what I mean?
Correct. That is true. That is true. Like we put our Viognier in stainless steel because we just want the wonderful aromas and flavors that we get from our fruit to really shine through with no influence from oak. But we do also put some of that Viognier in an oak barrel because we do want some of that flavor to be imparted into that wine. So it just all depends on what kind of wine ultimately we're trying to make. But that vessel can influence the aromas as well as the taste, but also where that grape was grown also has a tremendous.
That to me is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's because, it's like even when you think about New Zealand and South Africa, and your wines kind of did that for me. Had that, I felt like I was back in South Africa and going, wow, because there was just this, like, where especially when it comes to white wines, where I think this country struggled with white wines for a while, and I don't feel that now. Yeah. I mean, and maybe it was my palate, I don't know, but in South Africa, white wine is just, it's heavenly, man. It's so good. Right. And over here, it just took time, and yours were I mean, your wines were really, really exceptional, and I'm not messing around. I mean, that's, you being on the show every month, and Nancy and I are like, heck yeah, we can get behind that. It's some good wine. But there was something, I don't know, very true about it. And I think the sense of smell does help with that. But there's something very, it's not over messed with. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to really reflect our special place where the grapes are grown. And so when we taste our Grenache, it tastes and smells like we're in the field after a monsoon rain.
I think that's what it is. It's because Africa has that kind of, and that whole area is like Africa. That's why we lived out there. It is like certain parts of South Africa and Kenya to us.
Yeah.
And so I think when we tasted your wine, I'm like, just, everybody leave me alone with my wine.
So you get some of that red dirt that we have in our vineyard. It's really this volcanic soil and this reddish dirt. And you pick up a little of that rhyolite granite that we have in our vineyard that came off that Jericho.
Ooh, volcanic, yeah.
Yeah. So we get that in our wines that are really place-based. It's where the grapes are grown. There's this famous winery, Heights Martha's Vineyard, if you've ever heard it. It's on the western side of Napa Valley. Well, their wine, when you smell it, has this eucalyptus kind of smell or a hint of eucalyptus. Well, their Martha's Vineyard is adjacent to a eucalyptus tree kind of grove.
Oh, wow.
And they're so famous for that because you really pick that up in their wines, and it's truly a place-based influence.
But this is that why I say that authenticity that comes through, and we talk about farm to fork, right? This taste, eat local. Well, I think there's also something about getting a sense of tasting an area by what you're drinking, So, but you're really taking it to that level of smelling the place.
Yeah.
Having that in there, because there's nothing like after a monsoon rain and getting that, there's just there's a feeling. So I don't think it just, the sense of smell hits your palate. There's a feeling that comes with that, not just the memories we're talking about, but there's your body shifts as well. Like if you don't get monsoon rain, you get cranky. We all do. There's a
Yeah,
crankiness that comes with
yeah,
it. Like our bodies physically want the rain. We have
right,
water to drink, even though we're
right.
in the desert. We have the water. We can go swim. We can do all these things, water all over our bodies, whatever. However, you still crave the months. It's a very odd thing. And then as soon as it happens, there's this refreshing feeling
Yeah, it's like,
that, yeah, even if you didn't get out in it, there's the smell, like everything comes alive. All the animals. I had I wasn't a friend, someone, I belong to all these Facebook groups, right? Especially the Southwest. I miss it. It's home, and this guy, and don't freak out people, but the guy was like, the monsoon came. He went for a walk in the desert, and he said just on his property, within half an hour, he saw 8 rattlesnakes all come out because they did the same thing. They had to get
right.
their water, but everybody was chilled out. Like it's cool. So
It
that's why
really
your
is.
wine is so good.
It really is. Though we irrigate our vines and to make sure they have adequate water, there's nothing like Mother Nature. There's nothing like the rain falling from the sky and the grapes really, that's better for them than just irrigated water. So no, the whole vineyard comes alive. We get the frogs coming up, that we
Oh,
only get during monsoon season.
I love the little spade toad. Yeah, those little ones that come out, the little babies.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's like even when you're hiking, you're like, oh God, don't touch them, don't step on them, don't do it. But I think also because you're in a Sky Island area, that you
Yeah.
get these winds that also pick up the smell. And there is a
Correct.
scent, Nepalese. I mean, the cactus also have this fresh scent to it. So I wonder if
Oh,
that ends
absolutely.
up in your wine,
Yeah. Yeah. All of that Earth's influences that are all around the vineyard have an influence on the aroma as well as the taste of the wine. And
Mm.
I really incredible super tasters, sommeliers that have really studied this and continue to practice it, can tell when they're just smelling a wine and tasting that wine where that grape was actually grown in what part of the world,
Wow.
just from those. I can't do that, but just from those aromas that they're picking up in the wine and the taste, and
Wow.
that's fabulous. There's some other smells that, besides the earthiness or the fruit or the basics, there's some other things you might pick up in wine. So if you ever went into an Italian grocery store and they had a meat counter and they had
Mm. Salami.
salamis and everything hanging, well, that kind of beefy kind of smell is common in Syrah, for example. So you might pick up that Italian grocery store kind of
Mm.
aroma in a Sangiovese, in
Ooh.
a Grenache or a Syrah or a Mourvèdre. But if
Ooh.
you, and then the other is flowers. We haven't even begun to think about flowers
And
and
grass.
grass and herbs that also could come out of an aroma. For example, Pinot Noir, as we talked about earlier, or Nebbiolo or Syrah might have that violet kind of
Ooh, yes,
aroma
yeah.
that would tell you.
Lavender,
Lavender,
roses,
yep. The
roses or
roses,
something.
common. Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So all of those, being able to discern a violet from a type of rose is, you think you can do it, but when you smell, I have all these little vials of scents, and when you smell it and you don't know what it is, it's hard to really determine a rose versus a violet or a different hibiscus or a different kind of flower.
Ooh.
And you got to train your sense of nose. So
And these are all edible flowers, which is interesting too when you think about it.
yeah. So it's a fun exercise. So I do these workshops and called Le-Nez-Du-Vin at the tasting room, and people have a lot of fun because they begin to experience and pick out the nuances in the wine and be able to put a name or a label on what they're tasting as well as what they're smelling, so that they can enjoy that glass of wine a little bit better.
That's awesome that you do that. I saw that you have some fun events going on at the tasting room. Weren't you
We do.
painting some art? You had art going on the other day, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to get paint out with wine.
And we did sip and snip flower class.
That's what I was looking at. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
cool.
and it's a lot of fun because obviously flowers and smelling all the different flowers and then tasting the wine, they just really go really well together.
You know what's interesting too? This smells also create a texture. We were talking about the thickness or velocity, I should say.
Yeah.
But there's like you were just talking about, paint. I don't know, because Nancy is an artist, so I grew up with. I can tell you an oil paint, even if she doesn't bring turpentine out, acrylic, pastels, and as soon as you think of the pastel, you can almost taste chalk or like oily, like earth.
Yeah. Yep.
It's weird how you get a whole different texture from smell.
Absolutely. And I think we don't work that sense of smell as much as we should. We pick out what we don't like. You walk into some place, oh, I don't like
That's
that
stinky.
smell.
We don't want the stinkies.
Yeah, we don't want those stinkies, but we don't work on what do we really love? What is it about that cup of coffee and the smell of that coffee or nutmeg or, Thanksgiving dinner and you smell all of those various sweet smells of winter spices. And we forget, we rush over that. And to me, that's the beauty of enjoying everyday life, in my opinion. And of course,
I agree. There's we are out in parks and filming in weird places a lot in swamps. And I can't remember, it wasn't long ago we were out in a swamp. And I'm like, it was like jasmine, when you get that summer jasmine. Oh, or like when you get, the blossoms, orange blossom, that scent is just intoxicating. This was in a swamp. And I'm like, what is this? There's no flowers. It's Tupelo. And so, you've heard of Tupelo honey.
Right.
Well, this is where this all came from. And I'm going, because I had to Google this, because I'm like, where are the flowers, man? But apparently this is what was going on. And here we were in a swamp. And I was like, because there's wine that has that light honey scent too.
True.
Like honeysuckle. And that's where it took me. I'm like going, where's the wine? Where? Get it. Wine and swamps go really interesting. That's a whole other deal. But there's that. And I wish I could bottle it and send it to you. Here, I want wine like this.
Right.
It's so, amazing.
So
amazing.
we're so visual, so we remember a place by what you saw. But I want people to think about a place by what they smell also, and let that be part of your memory and part of your experience. Just like when you open a great bottle of wine, you're sitting with a group of friends and you're experiencing the friendship and you're tasting the wine, but close your eyes and experience the aroma of that wine and let that be part of that experience and part of that
conversation.
Yeah,
it's like, you can totally smell that this was this part of Arizona. Have a conversation like, have you been here? I love that. This is so cool. Peggy, this is awesome.
Fantastic.
I love this. I'm gonna go around sniffing everything now.
Great. I hope everyone
I'm hanging out with dogs. They're not. They're all cool with that. Well, they know. I mean, animals live by scent.
Smell.
I mean, I was talking about snakes. It is really snakes. No, they smell through their tongues. When you see their little tongues come out. I know people don't like to talk about snakes. I do. They're cool, but they can. We were in a swamp in Arkansas. And I see this stick, and Nancy's, that's not a stick. It was a snake. It was a brown. It was fine. Nothing to be. But most, like Arkansas is like a state of snakes. I'm sorry, but every time we're there, I see snakes. But it's the natural state. But he had his little nose up, and his tongue out like this. He was smelling me. And I'm like, okay, you don't want to get too close to that tongue, but it was really interesting to watch. And animals can teach us to do this. You know,
Yep.
that's how they know fear and how they know if they're safe. And that's part of their sense memory is you always think about how dogs remember you. It's by smell. It's
Yeah.
not your face. It may be your voice, but it's by sense of smell. So it's really
Yes.
fascinating, you know, this full circle of smell, but you're really right about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So enjoy
Very
your
cool.
wine, not only by tasting it, but smell the
Smell it.
aromas.
You got
Yeah.
to smell it, everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone, LDV-Winery.com is a website to go to. Also, sign up for their newsletters to keep up with events. They're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything. But Peggy is here every first Wednesday, so we can kick off the month with wine. We like that idea. And of course, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Thank you so much, Peggy.
Thank you. It was fun.